If you want to visit the largest desert in the world, it will bring you to Africa, as you can see on this world map. Come up north and you will see the massive Sahara Desert. It covers more than 9 million square kilometers, stretching from the Red Sea in the east and the Mediterranean in the north to the Atlantic Ocean in the west, including 10 countries: Algeria, Chad, Egypt, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Morocco, Niger, Sudan, and Tunisia. However, under the sterile sand are many secrets which scientists are still discovering as their tools get better, and some of them are terrifying and change everything, as we will show you in this video, so stay tuned. Did you know the Sahara once contained lush vegetation that would make the Amazon forest jealous? Scientists just discovered how humidity in the Sahara abruptly came to an end. However, to get to the root of this story, pardon the pun, we will go back sometime between 11,000 and 5,000 years ago. It was after the last ice age ended, transforming the Sahara Desert. Green vegetation grew atop the sandy dunes, and increased rainfall turned arid caverns into lakes. The area now known as the Sahara turned green, drawing in animals such as hippos, antelopes, elephants, and aurochs, the wild ancestors of the modern domesticated cattle who feasted on its thriving grasses and shrubs. However, the story changed about 8,000 years ago and the Sahara's green shift started. This was due to the Earth's tilt changing. The tilt began moving from about 24.1 degrees to the current 23.5 degrees. That tilt variation made a big difference. Right now, the Northern Hemisphere is closest to the Sun during the winter months. This may sound counterintuitive, but the Northern Hemisphere is tilted away from the Sun during the winter season because of the current tilt. During the Green Sahara, however, the Northern Hemisphere was closest to the Sun during the summer. At any rate, the tilt led to an increase in solar radiation or heat in Earth's Northern Hemisphere during the summer months. The rise in solar radiation amplified the African monsoon, a seasonal wind shift over the region caused by temperature differences between the land and ocean. The increased heat over the Sahara created a low-pressure system that ushered moisture from the Atlantic Ocean into the barren desert. Usually, the wind blows from dry land toward the Atlantic, spreading dust that fertilizes the Amazon rainforest and builds beaches in the Caribbean. This increased moisture transformed the formerly sandy Sahara into a grass and shrub-covered steppe. As animals there prospered, humans did too, eventually domesticating buffalo and goats and even creating an early system of symbolic art in the region. What fascinates climate scientists about the Green Sahara is how abruptly it appeared and vanished. The termination of the Green Sahara took only 200 years. The change in solar radiation was gradual, but the landscape changed suddenly. It was an example of abrupt climate change on a scale humans would notice. And to the big question, can the Green Sahara ever return? The answer is yes. The Green Sahara, also known as the African Humid Period, was caused by the Earth's constantly changing orbital rotation around its axis, a pattern that repeats itself every 23,000 years. However, because of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions that have led to runaway climate change, nobody can predict when the Sahara will turn a new green leaf. It is no secret that there is no spot safe from meteor strikes on the planet, and with the Sahara being so large, it stood a chance to have sustained some hits. In fact, it has a scar to show for it. While most meteors burn up harmlessly in the atmosphere, a 45-meter-wide depression known as the Carmel Crater is a silent testimony to the impact meteors could have. The strike occurred about 5,000 years ago, but you can still find pieces of evidence of the violent event in Carmel Crater. Around the crater, fragments of the meteorite itself have been discovered from where the impact shattered it and scattered it across the sand. Meanwhile, the Sahara has been a prolific source of meteorites, yielding about a fifth of all meteorites that have been recovered. This is because meteorites tend to stand out on the sand, making it easy for them to be spotted and picked up. In fact, the only other place where you can easily pick up meteors is Antarctica, where they contrast sharply with the snow. Another interesting find in the Sahara, which is connected to meteors, is desert glass. Where did this glass come from, and how are meteors connected? Well, about 29 million years ago, a meteorite struck the Earth, producing enough energy to melt a vast region of the Libyan desert into sheets of delicate green glass. That must have been a spectacular event, but the crater left by this explosion has yet to be found. The only evidence is the plentiful desert glass that you can still find today, and some of these glasses have turned up in unexpected places. For example, when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, one of the treasures he discovered was a jeweled breastplate decorating the late king. At its center was a sacred scarab beetle carved from green glass. The Egyptians probably had no idea of where the glass they used came from, but there was another artifact in the tomb with celestial origins. One of the daggers buried with the king was created from iron from a meteorite. Now, how about finding fish in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Sounds impossible because fish can't survive on the hot sand of the desert, right? Well, the fish found in the desert was long dead, and the scientists only found the fossil. How did the fish end up in the desert, and what does that tell us about the desert? Remember how the Sahara used to be green? Well, it attracted a group of people who scratched out an existence in Takakori. They left a trail of ancient food waste that holds the history of the Sahara Desert's climate in its bones. Nearly 5,000 years' worth of these fossilized leftovers were discovered in the Takakori rock shelter in southwestern Libya. It shows ancient humans' transition from a mostly fish diet to one that featured more land animals like sheep and cattle. These ancient people were human hunter-gatherers. Researchers from Belgium and Italy analyzed over 17,000 animal remains from the rock shelter. The bones were marked with cuts and burns, signs that they were cooked and eaten by humans. The researchers found that catfish and tilapia bones made up 90% of the finds from the first few thousand years that humans inhabited the shelter, starting at about 10,000 years ago. But of the more recent 4,650 to 5,900-year-old remains, only about 40% were fish bones and the majority belonged to mammals. Analyzing the bones further, the researchers found the number of tilapia decreased with time, possibly because catfish are better adapted to live in warm, shallow water. Previous research has shown that about 6,400 years ago, the Takakori shelter's original residents, called the Late Akarkas hunter-gatherers, were replaced by people who used early agricultural practices. Research has found evidence that the pastoral residents cultivated weed-like cereal grasses and that pastoral groups around the rock shelter kept herds of domesticated Barbary sheep. That has led some experts to suggest that the introduction of domesticated livestock may have exacerbated the region's shift from the Green Sahara to the desert seen today. However, critics suggest the transition back to a desert was inevitable. Nevertheless, the research provides evidence that regardless of whether humans influenced the creation of the desert, their behavior reflected the constraints of a rapidly changing climate. Now, when you think of the Sahara Desert, do you imagine whales frolicking on the rolling sand dunes? While that is highly unlikely to happen since whales can't survive outside water, there is evidence that the ancestors of the modern whale once swam around right in the hot African desert. Rewind to 1902 when a team of geologists guided their camels into a valley in Egypt's western desert. Centuries of strong wind had sculpted sandstone rocks into strange shapes, and at night the moonlight was so bright, making the sand glow like gold. A nearby hill was known as the Mountain of Hell because of the infernal summer heat, but in this arid valley lay the bones of whales. Some of the skeletons were 50 feet long, with vertebrae as thick as campfire logs. They dated back 37 million years to an era when a shallow, tropical sea covered this area and all of northern Egypt. And although the geologists didn't realize it at the time, the prehistoric specimens in the sand would offer clues to one of evolution's most nagging questions: how whales became whales. One clue found from these long-dead whales was the presence of feet. Scientists had long suspected that whales were terrestrial mammals that had eased into the ocean over millions of years, gradually losing their four legs. Proof of this is that modern whales have vestigial hind leg bones, but little in the fossil record illustrated the transition until paleontologists began excavating hundreds of whale fossils buried at Wadi Hitan and finding legs and knees. Older specimens of footed whales have since been identified, but Wadi Hitans are unparalleled in their numbers and state of preservation. The valley, about a 3-hour drive from Cairo, is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site visited by some 14,000 people each year. Paleontologists speculate that whales' landlubber ancestors were deer or pig-like scavengers living near the sea. About 55 million years ago, they started spending more time in the water, first eating dead fish along the shore, and then chasing prey in the shallows, and then wading deeper. As they did, some of them evolved traits that facilitated hunting in water. Over time, since they no longer had to bear their total body weight at sea, they got bigger, their backbones elongating and their rib cages broadening. Most of the fossils in the valley belong to two types. Basilosaurus was the giant with an almost eel-like body. The more petite but heavily muscled Dorudon looked more like a modern whale, at least, until its mouth opened to reveal a jaw lined with serrated daggers instead of peg-like teeth. Interestingly, the fossils of more than 75 whales have been found in the middle of the Atacama Desert in Chile. How they ended up there has been a subject of debate among scientists. As we have mentioned before, the Sahara Desert did not always contain sand. However, nothing prepares you for the next discovery in the African desert. It used to contain a lake covering more than 42,000 square miles. Incredible, right? This prehistoric megalake was formed about 250,000 years ago near modern-day Wadi Tushka. Where did the lake come from? It formed when the Nile River pushed through a low channel. Of course, the lake no longer exists, but there is evidences that National Air and Space Museum geologist Ted Maxwell and colleagues spotted while studying radar data of Egypt taken by the Space Shuttle Radar Topography mission. The team used images of wind-blown sediments, sediments produced by running water, and bedrock seen by radar beneath the desert sands to piece together the profile of this ancient megalake. Thanks to Egypt's extreme aridity, the geologists were able to use radar to see distinct subsurface features. They even discovered channels buried as much as 50 feet below the surface of the desert. How was the team able to mark the features of the megalake? Fish came to the rescue, but long-dead fish. For example, they used fossil fish found in deposits some 250 miles west of the Nile and 810 feet above sea level as a marker of the lake's highest shoreline. This helped them to estimate the Nile once flooded the entire Kasiba Tushka depression of Egypt, creating the giant lake. Also, the location of Paleolithic human settlements near the areas of Salima and Tafawi in Egypt corresponds to a lake covering some 42,000 square miles because it would have placed these settlements in what would have been desirable near-water regions. Water has and is still a huge factor in human population patterns. Meanwhile, the location and elevation of a different set of archaeological sites near Bir Kasiba, 93 miles west of the Nile, suggests there was a second and lower level of the lake at 623 feet above sea level. This second lake would have covered about 18,600 square miles, which is still impressive. The geologists also used the elevation of the Tushka Channel through which the water of the Nile once flowed into the desert as a base level to calculate the size of the second lake. These newly discovered lakes add to growing evidence of numerous early and middle Pleistocene lakes across North Africa that could have supported human migration patterns. The Sahara's evolution did not stop there, though. There is a long-standing belief among scientists that dinosaurs did not live in watery environments. Now an international team of researchers has unearthed unmistakable evidence that Spinosaurus aegypticus, the world's longest predatory dinosaur, was aquatic and hunted for food in a vast river system using tail-propelled swimming locomotion. This is the first time such a dinosaur adaptation has been discovered. The discoveries come from a comprehensive analysis of the world's only known Spinosaurus skeleton, discovered in the Moroccan Sahara's Kemkem region. The skeleton is also the most complete for a Cretaceous predatory dinosaur from mainland Africa ever discovered. As a result of this discovery, we may now see a whole new world of dinosaur possibilities. Rather than simply adding to an existing narrative, it begins a new narrative and significantly alters our understanding of what dinosaurs were capable of. This animal has never been seen before in 220 million years of dinosaur evolution. Experts discovered many more skeletal fossils between 2015 and 2019, including a remarkable fin-like tail with extraordinarily long spines that could move extensively laterally. The digital anatomy of the tail was captured using photogrammetry after all the fossils had been cleaned and prepared. Harvard researchers built a flexible tail model and coupled it to a robotic system that replicates swimming movements in order to quantify the tail's effectiveness. Next, the researchers compared the Spinosaurus tail's swimming abilities to those of other animal tail models such as those from other dinosaurs, crocodiles, and newts. The findings supported the concept of a true water-dwelling tail-propelled river monster. This remarkable find challenges our preconceived notions about dinosaurs and highlights the wonders of our world. Now, the Sahara Desert contains miles and miles of arid sand, but once in a while scientists find intriguing objects, apart from fish bones. This object, found in the Algerian side of the Sahara Desert, was actually older than Earth itself. It was a meteorite that landed in the Sahara Desert last year. It has been dated as 4.56 billion years old, making the volcanic rock older than Earth, which is approximately 4.54 billion years old. Named Erg-Chech 002 or EC002, the rock is a rare artifact from a protoplanet that was likely forming when the solar system was 2 million years old. A protoplanet is a large body of matter in orbit around the Sun or another star and is believed to be developing into a planet. The magma that EC002 forms out of would have been at least 1,220 degrees Celsius and taken at least 10,000 years to cool and solidify. The team behind the findings, led by Jean-Alex Barrot of the Université de Bretagne Occidentale, France, speculates that this astronomical body would have been destroyed or absorbed by bigger, rockier planets as they formed closer to the Sun. The meteorite was part of a group recovered in May 2020 near Bir Ben Takoul, southern Algeria, within the Erg-Chech Sandsea. The stones have a coarse-grained tan and beige appearance interspersed with green, yellow-green, and yellow-brown crystals. They are igneous, which means they formed from molten rock or magma. A rock like EC002 is a relic from the solar system's early days. Most of the material from the time has since become a part of other bodies that have evolved to form planets or asteroids, from which we have plenty of meteorites today. No known asteroid or meteorite looks like EC002, indicating how rare the finding is and how these rocks likely do not exist anymore. The rock that makes up the meteorite is of a type called andesite, which is made of solidified magma or lava. These are found on Earth in subduction zones, where tectonic plates slide below each other and rock from the crust enters into the mantle of the Earth. Meteorites have rarely been found to be andesites. EC002 is classified as an achondrite, a meteorite that originates from a parent body with a differentiated crust and core, like the rocky planets. Achondrites lack chondrules, which are round bubble-like grains of partially molten droplets that form in space when smaller bits of rock emerge. This piece of rock is believed to have come from the partly molten magma in its parent body's crust and is rich in silica, while most magma is rich in iron. The Sahara also used to be home to a wild variety of animals, some of whom are no longer in existence. For example, some 120 million years ago, a 9-meter-long crocodile, known as Machimosaurus rex, called what is now the Sahara Desert its home. What is interesting about this find is that the M. rex is the largest ocean-dwelling crocodile known to have existed. Imagine finding such an animal in the middle of a desert. However, the area where M. rex once lived was probably a vast lagoon that stretched to the Tethys Ocean, so it would have had no problem existing there. The ancient crocodile had a huge head, incredible bite strength, and short, brutal teeth that he used to crack the shells of ocean turtles and snatch fish. It may also have scavenged on the carcasses of the giant creatures which also shared its home. If it seems ironic that so much marine life is being uncovered in the Sahara, it's really because the desert is so inhospitable to life that paleontologists are making so many discoveries there. Without plants and soil getting between them and the rocks beneath, scientists can just stroll up to the fossils and pick them up. Now, you've heard about the lost city of Atlantis. You'll be shocked by how this famed city is connected to the next discovery in the Sahara Desert. This takes us to the Eye of the Sahara, also known as the Richat structure or the Guelb Richat. It is a geological formation in the Sahara Desert that resembles an enormous bullseye. The formation stretches across a 40-kilometer wide region of the desert in Mauritania. For centuries, only a few local nomadic tribes knew about the formation. It was first photographed in the 1960s by the Gemini astronauts, who used it as a landmark to track the progress of their landing sequences. Later, the Landsat satellite took additional images and provided information about the formation's size, height, and extent. Geologists initially believed that the Eye of the Sahara was an impact crater created when an object from space slammed into the surface. However, lengthy studies of the rocks inside the structure show that its origins are entirely Earth-based, prompting geologists to look for further explanations. Geologists have concluded that the Eye of the Sahara is a geologic dome. The formation contains rocks at least 100 million years old. Some date back to well before the appearance of life on Earth. These rocks include igneous volcanic deposits and sedimentary layers that form as the wind pushes dust and water deposits, sand and mud. Today, geologists can find several types of igneous rock in the Eye area, including kimberlite, carbonatites, black and rhyolites. However, there is another explanation for this Eye of the Sahara. According to this YouTube video, the remains of the ringed city Plato spoke of in the 4th century BC can be found in the African country of Mauritania, meaning it has been hiding in plain sight this whole time. The search for Atlantis has been ongoing since Greek philosopher Plato first described it in 350 BC, a mysterious island that seemingly just vanished. We've been looking in all the wrong places for its location since everyone assumes it must be under the ocean somewhere, such as in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, says the host of Bright Insight YouTube channel known only as Jimmy. Instead, he proposes the Eye of the Sahara is the mythical city's actual location. Solon, a statesman from ancient Greece, is the man who is thought to have passed on information regarding Atlantis to Plato. Jimmy says it is not only the exact size and shape Plato said it was, 23.5 kilometers across and circular, but mountains he described to the north can be seen quite clearly on satellite imagery as evidence of ancient rivers which Plato said flowed around the city. Plato said Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune and sank beneath the waves. The scientific record shows the Earth underwent significant climate upheaval around 11,500 years ago, when Atlantis is alleged to have disappeared. Jimmy also points out satellite imagery that resembles the aftermath of a tsunami unlike anyone alive today would have seen. Look at the satellite map of the Eye of the Sahara. Doesn't the entire region look like it was blasted by flowing water or a tsunami? One of the findings that keep baffling archaeologists is the hidden chamber in the Pyramid of Giza. Imagine renting an apartment and finding a room inside one of the rooms. You would be curious about the purpose, wouldn't you? Egyptian pyramids are some of the most magnificent man-made structures in history. Their massive size reflect the importance of the pharaohs in ancient Egyptian society. They were placed somewhere in between human and divine and were believed to have been chosen by the gods themselves to serve as their mediators on Earth. In fact, the pyramids were so tied to the kings that the pyramid's smooth, angled sides symbolized the rays of the sun, were designed to help the king's soul ascend to heaven and join the gods, especially the sun god Ra. What was the purpose of the pyramids? Ancient Egyptians believed that when the king died, part of his spirit, known as Ka, remained with his body. The people wanted to properly care for the king's spirit, so his corpse was mummified and everything he would need in the afterlife was buried with him, including all the trappings of royalty like gold vessels, food, furniture, and other offerings. Though pyramids were built from the beginning of the Old Kingdom to the close of the Ptolemaic period in the 4th century AD, the pyramid construction reached its peak in the late 3rd dynasty and continued until about the 6th, circa 2325 BC. One of the most popular pyramids is the Giza Pyramid. It is believed to be the tomb of one of the earliest pharaohs of Egypt, King Khufu, and stands 140 meters high and 230 meters long. The Giza Pyramid contains 3 main chambers that we know about: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and an underground chamber that appears unfinished. There's also a 47-meter-long corridor leading to the King's Chamber called the Grand Gallery. Scientists set out to check the internal structure of a pyramid to see if there are any previously unknown rooms, cavities, holes, corridors, or whatever that have not been discovered. They used a method known as cosmic muography, and what they found raised more questions than answers, including some areas conspicuously empty in what should have been solid rocks. They discovered a big void estimated to be between 30 and 40 meters in length. What puzzled the scientists was the purpose of this secret chamber that is located in an obviously special place. Suggestions included that it contains another tomb or even gold. One reason the scientists were fascinated was that the Giza Pyramid is basically devoid of things that people were often buried with, although that might have been due to the actions of grave robbers. But apparently they couldn't touch the big void, so whatever it originally contained must be intact. That's not all the mysteries scientists have found in ancient Egypt, and the next one is not stuff for the faint of heart. How about some macabre mummy juice? It all started when workmen found a black granite tomb 16 feet underground during the construction of an apartment building in the historic Mediterranean port city. The burial chamber was over 2,000 years old and quickly became an internet sensation. Horrifying images of a trio of skeletons floating in the murky soup led to rumors that the mummy juice contained medicinal or supernatural properties, with locals anxious to make a quick buck bottling and selling the stuff. Others feared its odd coloring signified the presence of a metal such as mercury. The large black granite sarcophagus was unearthed, cracked open, despite fears that doing so would unleash an ancient curse. Also, many people speculated it could have contained the remains of Alexander the Great, who founded the city. But the General Secretary of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, Dr. Mustafa Waziri, quickly killed the idea, saying instead it may have belonged to a priest. But then, the discovery of possible arrow damage to one of the skulls means the bones probably belonged to military officials, according to a statement released by Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities. So what was this mummy juice? Did it really have supernatural connotations? Disappointingly, no. Authorities revealed the liquid was neither juice for mummies that contains an elixir of life, nor red mercury, but something far more pedestrian and less appealing: sewage water. Waziri said the skeletons had partially disintegrated because sewage water from a nearby building had leaked into the sarcophagus through a small crack in one side. What about the curses that come with opening ancient coffins? Either they were just rumors or this particular coffin had no curses to offer, because Waziri said he was the first to put his head inside the sarcophagus and apparently nothing had happened to him. Of course, if you wander long enough in the Sahara Desert, you will find even more chilling discoveries. For example, after participating in the discovery of the Spinosaurus, Paul Sereno accidentally found the largest human graveyard in the Sahara. The site at Gobero in Niger was estimated to have been inhabited as early as around 10,000 years ago, providing more evidence that the desert used to be a habitable, green and lush environment. The remains of fish, crocodiles, and other animals are mixed in among the humans, and many of the discoveries were simply poking out of the sand. After 2 years of excavation, the burial site had yielded about 200 human burials. Other evidence in the vicinity proved there had been 2 separate periods of habitation separated by more than 1,000 years. Researchers discovered traces of the Kiphians and the Tenarians in the area. For example, they found bone jewelry and arrowheads, in addition to harpoons that would have been used to hunt in the nearby waters. Also, many of the burials were strikingly unusual and baffling to us trying to understand at this age. For example, one man was buried with his head in a pot, while another rested on the remains of a turtle shell. Perhaps we will never know precisely how these people lived and died. The Sahara is not giving up all its secrets. So, you have heard of the famous stone formation known as Stonehenge, which poses lots of questions. The Sahara Desert has its own mystery stone formation too, and it is no less intriguing. Hundreds of these stone structures dating back thousands of years have been discovered in Western Sahara, Morocco, in a territory little explored by archaeologists. The structures seem to come in all sizes and shapes, and archaeologists aren't sure what many of them were used for or when they were created. About 75% of the Western Saharan territory, including most of the coastline, is controlled by Morocco, while the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic controls 25%. The stone structures are designed in a wide variety of ways. Some are shaped like crescents, others form circles, some are in straight lines, some in rectangular shapes that look like a platform. Some structures consist of rocks that have been piled up into a heap, and some of the structures use a combination of these designs. For instance, one structure has a mix of straight lines, stone circles, a platform, and rock piles that form a complex about 2,066 feet or 630 meters long. Though the archaeologists are unsure of the purpose of many of the structures, they said some of them may mark the location of graves. Little excavation has been done on the structures, and archaeologists have found few artifacts that can be dated using a radiocarbon method. Among the few excavated sites are 2 tumuli, or heaps of rocks that contain human burials dating back around 1,500 years. One type of stone formation is known as goules by archaeologists. It has 2 rows of rocks that trail off into the distance. Goules are sometimes located near other stone structures. Their purpose is unknown. The researchers hope to continue gathering data such as soil samples with pollen that might indicate when and where vegetation and therefore water lingered. Burial mounds containing more graves might provide evidence about what people ate, how healthy they were, and how they lived. The Sahara Desert continues to serve up mysteries, and the next one is about an object found there whose functions have not been known till today. It is the Clayton Ring, and more bafflingly, these rings were found in the most inhospitable part of the Sahara Desert in Egypt. Named after the geographer and desert explorer P.A. Clayton, 1896 to 1962, Clayton rings are conical pottery cylinders open at both ends. They're always found with one or more perforated pottery discs that are always just slightly larger than the ring's smaller opening, but do not fit as lids. Some were custom-made by potters as a set, others were reworked from old pottery jars and shards like the ones on display. These objects were not used by the Egyptians living along the Nile. Instead, they formed an important part of the kit of the nomadic herders inhabiting the Dakhla oasis during Egypt's first dynasties called the Sheikh Mutar culture. Clayton rings and discs have been found in the oasis around seasonal hunting and herding camps of this culture, but remarkably also in caches up to 300 kilometers away from permanent water sources and beyond the safe roaming range of any herdsman or hunter. What made these objects so crucial that people went to the trouble to take Clayton rings far into the desert? This is a question that is yet to be answered. Now, you would think light bulbs were modern inventions, right? However, some findings in Egypt suggest some of our ancestors had such light-producing devices. Let's hop over to the ancient city of Dendera. You see, ancient Egyptians liked to decorate their walls, and they often used reliefs showing inscriptions. It is one of such that has given us ideas that ancient Egyptians knew about light bulbs. Beneath the Temple of Hathor at Dendera are inscriptions depicting a bulb-like object, which some have suggested is reminiscent of a Crookes tube, an early light bulb. Inside the bulbs is a wavy line from what resembles a lotus flower that could have been the socket of the bulb. Completing the image is what looks like a wire leading to a small box on which the air god is kneeling. Other details include a two-armed jed pillar which is connected to the wavy line and a baboon bearing two knives. In the eyes of the Sphinx, Eric von Daniken suggested that the snake represented the filament, the jed pillar was an insulator, and the tube was in fact an ancient electric light bulb. The baboon was apparently a warning that the device could be dangerous if not used correctly. It is easy to see the comparisons between this object depicted in Dendera and a light bulb, but was it really a light-producing device? While there have been many theories and controversies, here is what Sylvie Colville, who worked extensively on the inscriptions in this temple, suggested. The carvings depict Horsematoi as a serpent, a falcon, and as a child. According to one myth, Ehi sprung into existence out of a lotus flower that blossomed in the watery abyss of Nun at dawn at the beginning of every year. It is therefore suggested by some that the light bulb is in fact a lotus flower bulb, mythologically giving birth to the god. Another panel shows the bulb opening into a lotus blossom and the snake, the wavy line, standing erect in the center as a representation of the god Ehi. On the southern wall of the last room, a falcon preceded by a snake emerges from a lotus blossom within a boat. While the exact meaning of the Dendera light has not been established, it is worth noting that archaeologists have not found any unambiguous electrical artifacts, much less light bulbs, in the thousands of ancient sites throughout Egypt. Now, you may assume that's the end of the shocking revelations from Egypt, but you'd be mistaken. Archaeologists excavating a palace in Egypt's ancient city of Avaris made a disturbing discovery while working on the project. The skeletons of 16 human hands were discovered buried in 4 pits by researchers. 2 pits, one in front of what is thought to be a throne room, contained 1 hand each. The 14 remaining hands are kept in 2 more pits built at a later date in the palace's exterior space. What's more surprising is that they're all right hand, no left hands were found. The discoveries, which were unearthed in the Nile Delta northeast of Cairo, date back around 3,600 years to a time when the Hyksos, a race thought to have originated in northern Canaan, ruled over part of Egypt and established their capital at Avaris, which is now known as Tel al-Daba. The place was being utilized by one of the Hyksos rulers, King Kayan, during the time the hands were buried. These hands may be the first concrete evidence of an ancient Egyptian practice in which a soldier would swap an enemy's cut-off right hand in return for money, as documented in Egyptian text and art. Not only would cutting off an enemy's right hand have made counting victims easier, but it would have served the symbolic function of taking away that enemy's might. You rob him of all of his authority forever. Whether they belonged to Egyptians or those the Hyksos were battling in the Levant, it is not known. Both the Hyksos and the Egyptians practiced cutting off an enemy's right hand. On the tomb wall of Ahmose, son of Abana, an Egyptian battling against the Hyksos, one tale is written. The inscription, which was written roughly 80 years after the 16 hands were buried, says in part, "Then I fought hand to hand. I brought away a hand. It was reported to the royal herald. The writer received the Gold of Bravery as a reward for his efforts." Translation by James Henry Breasted, Ancient Records of Egypt, Volume 2, 1905. Ahmose captured 3 hands and was given gold in double measure during a later expedition against the Nubians to the south. The origins of this horrific custom remain a mystery to scientists, as there are no known records of this practice in northern Canaan, where the Hyksos are said to have come from. It could either have been an Egyptian ritual that they learned from Egyptians, or it could have started someplace else entirely. As the earliest proof of this practice, it is important to note that in ancient Egypt, the brutal treatment of prisoners was nothing new. A 5,000-year-old artifact, the Narmer palette, depicts slaughtered prisoners and a pharaoh poised to stomp on the head of a man on his knees at the time of ancient Egypt's unification. Another disturbing discovery is a 4,000-year-old funerary temple uncovered in Egypt, which included a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, including coffins containing mummies. The huge burial grounds are located in the ancient Egyptian city Memphis. More than a dozen pyramids may be found within the UNESCO World Heritage Site, including Egypt's oldest, the Pyramid of Djoser. But one of the most exciting findings was the identity of a 4,200-year-old queen. Archaeologists unearthed her grave near the pyramid of King Teti, who ruled Egypt during the Age of the Pyramids between the years 2680 and 2180 BC. The ancient female monarch has now been named Queen Neet, King Teti's wife. Her name was finally discovered inscribed on a temple wall and written on a fallen obelisk at the tomb's entrance. Hawass, the archaeological mission's leader, said he predicted that recent findings would help rewrite ancient Egypt's history. His team also unearthed 52 burial tunnels, each about 30 to 40 feet deep, with more than 50 wooden coffins dating from the New Kingdom, roughly 3,000 years ago, inside. The team also discovered a 13-foot-long, 3-foot-wide papyrus on which Chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead is inscribed in hieroglyphics, along with the owner's name. The Book of the Dead is an ancient Egyptian document that outlines how to negotiate the afterlife to reach the field of Aru, or paradise. It was the first time such a big papyrus had been discovered inside a burial pit. Additionally, the site yielded numerous wooden funeral masks, a shrine to the god Anubis, guardian of the cemetery, and sculptures of Anubis, along with games buried with the dead to keep them occupied in the hereafter, also being discovered at the site. One of them was a game named 20, which was discovered with its previous owner's name still visible on it. In the shafts, another game named Senate Cross was discovered. It's similar to chess, except that if the deceased person wins, they enter the hereafter safely. And you already know what happens if they lose, right? What about discovering a whole city buried underground? Famed Egyptologist Zahi Hawass announced the discovery of the Lost Golden City. He also said the city, known as Aten, is the largest ancient city to be uncovered ever in Egypt. The city existed as far back as the reign of Amenhotep III, one of the most powerful kings to ever rule the ancient nation. He was the king from 1391 to 1353 BC. The city was still in existence when pharaohs Ay and Tutankhamun, whose nearly intact tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings by British archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922, were in power. Discovering Aten helps us to see what Egypt looked like at the height of its influence and wealth. Digging has already revealed a large number of valuable archaeological finds, such as jewelry, colored pottery, scarab beetle amulets, and mud bricks bearing the seals of Amenhotep III. The team began excavations on the west bank of Luxor near the Valley of the Kings, some 500 kilometers or 300 miles south of the capital Cairo. The remains were in surprisingly good condition, with almost complete walls still standing and rooms containing the tools that the ancient Egyptians used in their everyday life. They have already dug up an ancient bakery, an administrative district, and a residential area. As a territory that has been inhabited for millennia, burial places are not a surprising find in Egypt. What is surprising is the nature and scale of these ancient resting places. Take, for example, 5 tombs uncovered in Saqqara in the vast necropolis south of Cairo. According to Egypt's Antiquities Ministry, the stony tombs date back to the Old Kingdom about 2700 to 2200 BC and First Intermediate about 2181 to 2055 BC eras. The tombs, which are engraved with colorful shapes, belong to top officials. One of the tombs belongs to a woman that could be the wife of a man named Yarat, and it has a rectangular burial shaft. Another tomb belongs to Pepi Nefani, who is the supervisor of the Great House, a priest and the purifier of the house. It has a 6 meters deep burial shaft. Another tomb consisting of a 6-meter deep burial shaft belongs to a woman named Peti. She was the priest of Hathor, the goddess of fertility and love. The fourth one was built for a man named Hinu, the overseer and the supervisor of the royal house. It consists of a rectangular 7 meters deep burial shaft. On a more recent note, the Sahara is still keeping some macabre secrets. Flight Sergeant Dennis Copping was a young pilot flying a damaged P-40 Kitty Hawk to a British base in the desert for repairs back in 1942. However, somewhere on the journey, the pilot and the aircraft disappeared, and nothing was heard from the duo again. 70 years later, an oil worker stumbled across the remains of the aircraft, which was mostly intact, having never been disturbed. He also saw evidence that a parachute had been used to create a shelter in the blazing sun. The plane was later taken to El Alamein Museum and restored. Some parties wanted the aircraft to have remained in place as a tribute to Copping. Others thought that the restoration job the museum did made it look like a poorly painted model. While people continued to bicker about the plane, no signs of Dennis Copping were found. His exact fate is another mystery that the Sahara is holding.